Hashtag the psychology of looking at a nude painting. Why do we look at the human body in art? Why can a nude painting make us feel beauty, curiosity, discomfort, vulnerability, or even freedom? And why has the naked human figure remained one of the most powerful subjects in art for thousands of years? The answer is much deeper than simply beauty. The human body is the first visual language we learn. Before we understand written words, we recognize faces. We notice eyes. We recognize movement. We learn to understand emotion through posture, gesture, and expression. The body communicates before we speak, and artists have understood this for thousands of years. From ancient Greek sculpture to Renaissance paintings, from modern photography to contemporary art, the nude figure has been used to explore far more than physical appearance. It can represent beauty, power, vulnerability, desire, mortality, freedom, identity, and sometimes simply the human condition. But looking at a nude in a gallery is not the same as looking at a person. That distinction is important. A person is alive. A painting is an artistic representation. Yet our brains can respond emotionally to an image of a body almost as if we were encountering another human being. We recognize posture. We recognize facial expressions. We notice whether a body appears relaxed or tense. We instinctively interpret the direction of the eyes. Even when the figure is completely still, our minds begin constructing a story. Who is this person? What happened before this moment? What are they feeling? Are they comfortable? Are they vulnerable? Are they powerful? The artwork becomes a psychological encounter. For centuries, however, the nude was surrounded by rules. In European art, artists could paint the naked body, but they often placed it inside an acceptable story. The woman could be Venus, the goddess of love. She could be a biblical figure. She could be a mythological character. The mythology created a kind of protective distance. The viewer was not necessarily looking at an ordinary person. The viewer was looking at an idealized figure from another world. But then artists began challenging those traditions. Francisco Goya's The Nude Maya is a famous example. She is not presented as an ancient goddess. She simply lies on a bed and looks directly toward us. Her gaze is calm, confident, almost confrontational. The viewer is suddenly aware of being watched, and that changes the psychological relationship. We're no longer simply looking at a body. The body appears to look back. Then came Edouard Manet's Olympia. When it was exhibited in Paris in 1865, the painting caused enormous controversy. Olympia did not look like a distant goddess. She looked like a contemporary woman, and she looked directly at the viewer. Her gaze was one of the most important elements of the painting. She seemed aware that she was being observed. She did not appear embarrassed. She did not seem to ask permission. The viewer was forced to confront the fact that looking is itself an act. And this is one of the most interesting psychological questions surrounding nude art. Who has the power? The person looking or the person being looked at? Traditional art often placed the viewer in a position of control. The viewer could observe the body without being challenged. But when the figure looks back, that relationship changes. The viewer may suddenly become self-conscious. You may begin to wonder, why am I looking? What am I expecting to see? How am I interpreting this person? Am I seeing a human being, a symbol, a fantasy, or simply an artistic composition? This is where nude art becomes much more than a question of nudity. It becomes a question about the gaze, the way we look at other people, the way society teaches us to see bodies, and the assumptions we bring into a gallery. Culture plays a major role. A nude figure that seems completely natural in one culture or historical period may seem provocative in another. Ideas about modesty, beauty, gender, age, and the human body change over time. That means there is no single universal response to nude art. Two people can stand in front of the same painting and experience it differently. One may see beauty. Another may see vulnerability. Another may see political commentary. Another may simply appreciate the artist's use of light and composition. The artwork has not changed. The viewer has brought a different history to it. This is particularly important when we look at the idealized nude. For centuries, artists often created bodies that did not correspond to ordinary human proportions. They lengthened limbs, smoothed skin, perfected symmetry, changed anatomy. The goal was not always realism. The goal was an ideal. The Renaissance nude, for example, was frequently connected to classical ideas of harmony and proportion. But modern artists began questioning the idea that there was one perfect human body. Picasso fragmented the figure. Modigliani elongated it. Egon Schiele distorted it. Lucian Freud emphasized flesh, weight, age, and physical reality. Each artist challenged a different expectation. And this brings us to an important idea. A nude painting does not necessarily tell us what the human body is. It tells us how an artist, and sometimes an entire society, sees the human body. That is why nude art can reveal history. Look at the body in a Renaissance painting. Then look at the body in a 19th century painting. Then compare it with a 20th century photograph. You're not simply seeing different bodies. You're seeing different ideas about beauty, gender, morality, power, and identity. The body becomes a cultural document. There's also something deeply vulnerable about the nude figure. Clothing communicates social identity. It can tell us someone's profession, wealth, status, religion, or culture. Remove the clothing, and many of those signals disappear. The body becomes more universal. That can make the figure seem vulnerable. But vulnerability can also become strength. A person who chooses to be seen without the protective language of clothing can appear powerful precisely because there is nothing left to hide. Artists have used that contradiction again and again. The nude can be fragile, and it can be defiant. It can be intimate, and it can be monumental. It can be personal, and it can represent humanity itself. This is why the best nude paintings are rarely only about nakedness. They are about looking. They ask us to examine our own response. What do we notice first? The face? The body? The pose? The lighting? The texture? The emotion? And what do we assume about the person before we know anything about them? That last question may be the most important, because art can reveal our own assumptions to us. When you stand before a nude painting, you're not only seeing the artist's choices, you're seeing your own cultural history, your personal experiences, your ideas about beauty, and your expectations about the human body. The painting becomes a mirror, not necessarily a mirror of your physical appearance, a mirror of your perception. So the next time you enter a gallery and encounter a nude figure, don't rush past it. Stand for a moment. Look at the composition. Look at the face. Look at the posture. Notice your first emotional response. Then ask yourself why you reacted that way. You may discover that the most interesting subject in the room is not the figure in the painting. It is you, the person standing in front of it. Because throughout the history of art, the nude has never been only about the body. It has been about how human beings see one another, how we understand beauty, how we experience vulnerability, how we define identity, and how we look at ourselves. Perhaps that is why the human figure has survived every artistic revolution. The body changes, fashion changes, culture changes, art changes, but our fascination with the human form remains. And when we stand before a nude painting, we are participating in a conversation that began thousands of years ago. A conversation between the body, the artist, and the person who is looking.